Hey everyone, thanks once again for joining me. Just me today for the Salty Witches podcast. Um, Austin is running the shop, and rather than going a whole week without giving you anything to listen to or enjoy, I figured it would be good maybe just for me to get on here and talk. Just maybe not quite as long today, but to talk a bit about some of the stuff that's kind of hit our radar in the last week or so since we recorded our last episode. Um, the first thing that I want to get into is actually a listener question. And this was a question that came through, and I'm not gonna, I'm gonna keep this person's information, confidential. But it came through, and I don't know necessarily that it was a question for the podcast or really kind of just a question for us here in the shop. But I think it was an interesting question, and and in answering that question, I felt it was maybe worthwhile for us to discuss that here for maybe a few of the rest of you who are still learning, or maybe you already know what you're doing, right? But it's always good to get a refresher, right? So the question is basically this person contacted us, and they they live on a property kind of in a more rural kind of an area, right? They've got a good chunk of land, and they have neighbors apparently that I found out through conversation that they don't really get along with very well. Um, Not good people, the neighbors apparently. And anyway, so this person was kind of out on their property one day, and they found the remains of a chicken whose head had been taken off, a headless chicken on their property. Um, Very sad, right? Very sad. We don't we don't necessarily like animal cruelty, but we also understand and accept that yes, animals and working with animals and sacrificing animals is absolutely a legitimate component of magical practice, depending on your tradition and your culture. So they find this chicken, and they of course immediately like alarms go off, right? Like, oh no, the neighbors that we're not necessarily very friendly with have maybe done something. This is someone who I think is they're kind of just at the beginning of their journey into spirituality or folk magic, witchcraft, whatever they may end up calling it for themselves, right? But anyway, because of that, though, I think that they're on guard, right? They're kind of looking for things, and everything is a sign right now, right? So anyway, so they contact us to find out, like, well, what do I do, right? And it's always important to remember, and this is the conversation that we had with this person, but for you as well, it's always important to remember that when we find something like this, we have a moment like this where we, immediately, like, we kind of start to feel a little bit of paranoia, or, we're just not sure, right? And we want to go the magical route, which is good, right? I mean, we're witches, we're magical practitioners, right? Of course, we want to go the magical route, right? But before we do that, we owe it to ourselves, I think, to explore the mundane pieces, right? And so in doing that, we talk a little bit about, just some of the realities of this person's circumstances, right? Like they are in a rural area, right? They so we're seeing a lot of like a lot of farm land, right, around this area, right? Just open area here, right? And and you're gonna find anytime you've got farms, right? Chickens are gonna be a thing, right? They're gonna be presents, right? So there was that piece. Because of the rural nature of where this person is living, we also understand that there are most likely wildlife in that area that are going to certainly prey on the livestock and chickens that might potentially be on somebody's farm, right? So there's just a lot going on there, right? That we need to consider on a more mundane level. We need to look at the likelihood that even though this person maybe isn't on the best terms with their neighbor, right? And if you're watching this and you're like, well, I don't really live on a farm, but I trust me, I got people in my life I'm not on good terms with, right? Most of us do, unfortunately. Um, but we have to look at that again, kind of very, very. We have to be a little bit skeptical and be very honest with ourselves. Like we can have enemies, we can have people that we don't like, we can have people that certainly don't like us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to have the knowledge that would be required to really work an effective hex or curse. Okay. So those are things to consider, important pieces to remember, right? And and again, sometimes the thing is just a thing, right? And it doesn't have to be an omen or a magic thing, right? But in talking with this person, I felt it was also good to provide them a little bit of information. If any of you, I mean, from the perspective that maybe this was a magical attack of some sort, right? If any of you ever find yourself in a moment where you are, you know, um, finding something like this, you have found, maybe it's not a chicken, right? But I mean, just something else, right? And it just seems like odd or, too a little too serendipitous, maybe or coincidental, right? Um, the first thing that I usually tell people in a situation like this is don't physically touch it. Do not touch it. Um, find an implement, find something that you can use to move that item. Do not physically touch it with your hands. Okay. Mainly because these items are very often, well, they're very often they're gross. Like they're going to have who knows what on them that you probably don't want on your skin. Um, a lot of the times these are made, these items, if they are legitimately a means of delivering a baneful working of some sort, these are items that will have toxic or poisonous substances on them. And again, you just don't want this on your hands, right? Don't touch these things, right? Beyond that, the physical connection that you have with that item is something that can work to energetically deliver or to release the intent of that working. So first of all, don't touch it. Um, okay. Second, move it. Get it off of your property. Get it away from your home. If you're living in like an apartment where you're like, I don't really have property, at least move it away from your home. And typically that's going to involve, again, picking it up, not with your hands, but with something else. I usually tell people to like pick it up, wrap it up in something, even if it's just something like like plastic grocery bags or something, right? And then utilize that to carry it. Get in your car, drive it away from your home, away from where you found it, away from where you live. You want to get that energy as far from you as possible. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that you need to like take in, a drive across the country to get rid of it, right? But something really just to, get it maybe just a few miles away from your home. Okay. The reason this is important is that this will give you hopefully a little bit of peace of mind, right? But it helps to prevent anything negative around that energy from maybe potentially like accidentally coming into connection with you, right? Like it's far more likely that you might potentially stumble across that thing or come into contact with that thing if it's still just somewhere near your home or your space, right? That happens. Sometimes we accidentally find ourselves connecting or doing something, right? Anyway, uh, once you've done that, once you've disposed of that thing, and it's important to look at disposal of something like this or disposal really of any kind of magical component, right? We always want to, as witches, we always want to try to be as ecologically friendly as possible, right? I've talked to a number of witches over the years who've been like, oh, well, I just go and I dump all of my spell remains in the local river. And I'm like, oh my God, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Don't do that, right? Anyway, so but we, though we try to be ecologically friendly, we need to try to be ecologically friendly, right? That's one of our responsibilities as witches and magical practitioners. Sometimes it's just frankly it's going to be impossible to do that. So in a situation like this where you are in the process of disposing of something that would be, you believe, a component of a baneful working against you, um, seriously, don't worry about it. Don't bury it in the ground. Don't do any of those other things. Please don't throw it in a local water supply or waterway. Just find a dumpster somewhere. Seriously, like go and just find even like a local grocery store, right? Just somewhere far enough away for you to feel a little bit of comfort, and just throw it in a dumpster. Just dispose of it in that manner. That serves a couple of purposes. One, again, you've now placed that thing in a new garbage, a dustbin, whatever, a dumpster, right, where it's less likely to come into contact with someone else. Beyond that, it's also it shows your spirits and the spirits that could potentially be the energies that could potentially be connected to that item. It shows them like, this is garbage. This means nothing. And even if there was a hex or a curse attached to this thing, that also to me means nothing, right? And that can do a lot for you on a psychological level. That could do a lot for the spirits who are paying attention and for those energies, because they will see that and they'll go, this person didn't care. This person didn't care. And that's the extent and the power that this person potentially has, right? So, oh well, nice try, right? And as simple as that might sound, that shit works. It works. Approaching things in that way, it works. So just a bit of information that was discussed with this person who contacted us this week. I should add, from that moment, go on with your life. right? One of the worst things that you could do if you're in a situation where you have legitimately been affected by baneful magic, or someone has tried to impact your life in some way with baneful magic, one of the worst things you can do is worry and get fearful and worry and worry and worry and worry. And, that is one of the worst things you can do, because what that does in essence is it lowers your natural defenses, it lowers your energetic guard. And depending on the spirits and the energies and the way that that baneful working was handled by the practitioner who did it, your fear and your worry in extreme situations can basically be a doorway into you for their negative intent. So I know it sounds tricky and weird to tell you, like, don't be afraid, don't be fearful of these things, because they're bad and they're scary, right? But you got to do your best not to go there. Okay. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit, I wanted to, at Austin's request, Austin shared a video to some of our other social media accounts in the last few days on just very, very simply just preparing I believe he did a banishing candle. I think it was a banishing candle. Oh my gosh, I don't know. He's not here now, is he? And I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, we're going to talk about that later today, because I thought it would be a good addition to what I was just talking about a moment ago with getting rid of something that you suspect would be a component of a baneful working against you. Right? So we're going to talk a little bit about just basically logistics, the steps to do this today. Okay, and the information that I'm going to go over today will probably be just a bit different than maybe what Austin went over in his video. Though Austin and I are coven mates, and life mates, when we spend so much time and our practices are so similar, there will also always be those things that differ. And that's a good thing. Difference is a good thing when it comes to witchcraft and spiritual practice, okay? Because if you're not striving for some sense of individuality and difference, then you're not really a witch, you're a cult member, right? Remember, cults and covens, not the same thing. Okay. Anyway, so I have a few items here. Okay, I have a mortar and pestle, right? Most of you are probably familiar with this, right? You've seen one of these. I have a bottle of condition or conjure oil. Just a little tag on the bottom. It says where it was made. Made in Mexico, made in China, made in China. That's okay, right? Pillar candle, right? This one's a new one. You can see it's actually still in plastic, okay? Because we're not really making a banishing candle. At the moment, I don't really have need of a banishing working. And I'll be honest with you, when I'm doing banishing workings, I don't typically utilize candles too often for those. Mainly because I'm not a big candle magic person. Like just I don't really do a lot with candle magic. But candle magic is wonderful. It's so accessible and it works for everybody. And yeah, so don't let me ruin your fun with candle magic, okay? Because it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Okay. I also have a bag of herb that is associated with banishing. This is hyssop. I know you can't really see that label, can you? It's hyssop. Hyssop is very well known for its properties to banish, to remove what we would consider just undesirable energies. It's very good for that. It's very good for clearing, and you can utilize hyssop in so many ways. You can do what we're going to do today with this candle. In preparing this candle, you can add it to a cleansing bath. You can add it to grind it down fine, a little bit finer, and add it to something like a floor sweep, right? I mean, there's so much you can do with this. So don't be afraid to experiment and have fun with the different ways that you incorporate plant spirits and herbs into your magical practice, right? It doesn't always have to be that one thing, right? Anyway, back to our candle. So I typically, when I'm doing this, what I'll do is I'll choose my herbs, right? Sometimes it's more than one. I just got this one here as an example today, but I'll choose my herbs and I will grind those up in my little mortar and pestle. And you just need a little bit. Seriously, you just need a little bit, okay? Because what we're in essence doing is we're going to be dressing this candle, okay? And you don't need a lot of herb when you're dressing a candle. For one thing, it's a fire hazard if you have a whole lot of herb on a candle. The herb won't necessarily stick as well into the candle if it's big clumps, right? We also, again, going back to what I mentioned a few moments ago about being ecologically sound, as witches and magical practitioners, we need to be conservative when it comes to the uses of these kinds of things in our magical practice. You know, herbs and plant spirits are amazing for us to work with, and they give us a lot of really good energy and oomph. And if we actually do the extra little bit of work to connect with the plant spirit itself, they can become really powerful allies for us for things even beyond magical or spell work. But we need to be conservative in the way that we utilize these things because every time we harvest a plant, every time we take from the earth in that way, that's what we're doing. We're taking, right? And just humanity by and large is not very good at giving, right? We're very good at taking, but we're not so good at giving back, right? So with that in mind, you know, be sparing with your ingredients, okay? Unless you have a spell or a working that requires that you use like a whole pound of a particular herb, and that spell does not exist. But if you, for some reason, created that spell for yourself, really think about that, okay? You shouldn't need that much. That tiny pinch of herb is going to carry just as much spirit and energy as a pound of that herb, I promise you. Okay, so I'm grinding my herbs down, and you want to try to grind these as small as you can. And it gets a little tricky sometimes depending on the herb, right? If you're like grinding up something like a really thick stem or bark or root, it's going to be a process. And for that, I'm going to tell you, go the high-tech route, go the modern witch route, and just get yourself a coffee grinder, okay? Because that's going to save you so much time. And trust me, your spirits are not going to be mad at you for using a coffee grinder to grind up your herbs as opposed to something like this, right? You're good, right? But usually, like you're looking at just like leaves, and you know, and petals, like these kinds of things, you know, flowers. Usually, your mortar and your pestle is good. Okay, all right, and you're going to take this and you're going to grind your herbs up as fine as you can, right? Because the smaller and finer they are, the better they're going to stick to your candle, right? And you're going to get that done. And as I'm grinding my herbs, I typically like to I like to talk to them. Like I'll add this herb, like for today, like, you know, we're using as in this example, we're using hyssop, right? And so I'm going to sit and I'm going to talk and I'm going to tell this herb, I'm basically, you know, like, this is who you are. This is your purpose in this working. This is why I've chosen you. And this is the work that we do, something along those lines, right? And I kind of do that as I'm stirring, as I'm grinding with my pestle, right? There's power in this movement. There's power in this movement. And for many of you, if you think about it, your mortar, in essence, really, this is just a tiny cauldron, right? That's all it is, right? Um, so I'm going to grind those down and I'm going to charge those with intent and I'm going to put power in those and I'm going to breathe onto those, right? I'm going to give them some of my power in my life, right? And I'm going to hold all of that. That's going to be my focus and my intent, right? Okay. So once that's done, I'm going to kind of set those off to the side. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my candle prepared, right? And there are many ways to do this, okay? But one of the easiest ways, to be honest, is really just to name the candle, okay? And I'm so sorry, I realize I'm jostling the camera a bit here. I apologize. But you're gonna name the candle, okay? And that can be something as simple as, you know, like just actually just talking to it. Some people will do what they call baptizing a candle. I don't necessarily go to that extent, particularly not for a candle like this that's like been wrapped and it's like completely new, right? But you know, depending on your how you feel, right? Nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to take this candle and I'm going to name it. I'm going to tell this candle, I'm going to talk to it. I'm going to talk to it, right? And that might seem silly for some people, but again, if you're a witch and you put any kind of belief into the process or to the concept, the philosophy of animism, this has some degree of intelligence. This has a spirit of its own, and I'm going to talk to that spirit, right? And I'm going to remind it of what it is. I'm going to maybe tell it who it is, and I'm going to let it know this is what we're doing. Okay, this is our purpose, right? So you're gonna name it, and typically you're gonna name it something to do with like you are blank, right? You are a tool and implement that will be used to banish blank energy, right? You are a candle, and as you burn, this is your name. You are like a banisher, right? I mean, whatever it is, right? I'm just giving you some examples, right? You know, and this is what you will do. This is your purpose. This is the work we will do together, right? And you're gonna name this, right? Get this ready to go, right? And I usually set this here, right? Or kind of set this somewhere in front of me. Okay. Now, next step, okay. Once we've kind of got all of this consecrated, right? We have our oils too, right? Remember, but these typically, if they're conjure oils or conditional oils that have been prepared by a legit practitioner, these are already charged and consecrated. This already knows its purpose, right? You just have to kind of connect it to your spell, right? Through the use, right? So I've taken my herbs, right? My candle, everything here is named, ready to go, right? So now I'm going to take my aluminum foil, right? And I just use just a little sheet, right? Again, like be conservative, right? We don't want to put any additional waste out there into the world, right? Unless we have to, right? So, and then you're going to take your herbs, right? And you're going to kind of just sprinkle them across your aluminum foil, right? And kind of get in there with your fingers and kind of scatter them around so they're evenly dispersed, right? Okay, and then you're going to take your oil, you're going to pop this bad boy open, right? And screw this thing, and you're going to put just a couple of drops, just a couple of drops in your palm, okay? And it doesn't matter which hand you're using. If you're a lefty, doesn't matter, right? Okay. And you're going to take your hands and you're going to, after you put the lid back on your oil and screw that tight, set that aside, you're going to take your hands, right? And you're going to clap your hands together and you're going to rub that oil around your palms. Okay. You want the palms of each hand to be fairly well coated, right? You're going to grab your candle, both hands, right? You're going to move one hand in kind of a twisting motion up and the other hand down. The idea with that is that the energy of the candle will then flow in all directions. The intent and the power of this will flow in all directions. Okay. Now, there are some practices or traditions where if you're calling in or attracting, you'll start at the top and you'll just in one clean motion, you'll just move down the candle. Okay. There are others where if you're banishing or sending away, you'll start at the bottom and you'll move up the candle. Okay. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's all about you, what you connect with, and your practice. None of those is going to hold any more power or be any more effectual than any other method. Okay. I like this one because I tend to approach my spells when I'm dealing with something, even something as simple as a banishing. Um, I tend to approach them in like multiple ways. Like I want the effect of that working to have kind of like, or to manifest in kind of multiple ways. And that's just a component of kind of how I work my magic. But you don't need to work your magic that way, okay? You go with what works for you, okay? Anyway, once this candle has been coated with that oil, I'm going to take this candle, right? And I've unwrapped it from its plastic at this point, right? Okay. And because we're banishing with this particular example, we're going to put it on one end of the aluminum, right? And I'm going to roll it away from me through the herb. And because it's got that oil on it, it's going to pick up that herb, right? So when you're sending away, you're going to roll your candle away from right? And that's not just true for banishing. That could be true really for any kind of influence. Maybe we want to see not necessarily a banishing, but we want to see an influence lesson. Like maybe we're trying to maybe remove a particular person from our life, right? Also a banishing, right? But we don't necessarily want them to completely disappear or go away, right? We just need to kind of feel their energy a little less in our lives, right? Same process. We roll away, we move away, right? If we're attracting or calling in, or we need to see something increase, we roll toward ourselves. We move that candle toward ourselves, right? Because I want this closer, I want this more, right? So a little bit of an extra tip there, right? Something to kind of help get you in the right zone, right? To show your spirits, right? And your spirits, your herbs, and your other things you're working with, right? Like this is how we're doing this. These are the mechanics and the logistics of how this is going to work, right? Okay. Little stuff, but it all adds up and it's powerful. This is results-oriented practice, okay? And that this is going to be something that's going to work. This is going to give you better results, okay? Okay, once we've got our candle coated, right? You've got what you need at that point. Put that candle in a safe holder, right? Or if you've built up a little altar to place this on, right? There you go. And light your candle. Okay. Now for banishing workings, I'm going to say there really is no ideal day for banishing because we kind of tend to banish things. We tend to let go of things as we need, right? So there, are some traditions perhaps that will tell you like, oh, well, do your banishing workings on this day because it's better. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And if that feels right for you to maybe do your banishing working on a Tuesday, wonderful, go for it, right? But otherwise, don't be too worried. One bit of advice I might recommend as you're looking at candle magic as a component of your practice is to learn the correspondences for your days and even potentially your hours, because every hour in the day, every hour of every day, I should say, will have a particular planetary correspondence. And if you're learning your alignments and your correspondences, you of course want to know that every day slash planet slash hour, right, will have significance, will have purpose, right? Yeah, I don't know. I like to do just personal note. I like to do banishing work on Sundays. Sundays really are good for so many things, but because of the way that I tend to work my banishings, I like to do them on Sundays because for me, the light of the sun, Sunday is the sun's day. For me, the light of the sun is very good at kind of piercing through and seeing through and bringing clarity to things. And I know that when we're doing banishing working, sometimes clarity can be an issue there, right? Like we know we want this to go away, but who knows, right? There could be maybe some sort of unknown around that, right? I find there's usually unknowns when it comes to our magical work, right? Which is why divination is so significant or so important at the beginning or before you do a spell, right? So go with Sundays if you wish, but absolutely your choice, right? So anyway, quick and dirty example on how to prepare a candle, really a candle for any kind of thing, to be honest, right? The alignments and the way that this candle will ultimately manifest will be what you do to, in essence, program the candle, to name it, to name your other correspondences, to choose herbs that have particular association with the thing you're trying to do, right? If I were working a candle for love, I probably wouldn't have gone with white. I would have gone with a color, any color, but a color that for me connected me to love, right? Typically, you're going to find pinks and reds. Okay, for some people, purples are really good colors, right? Those are all good colors for love. Okay, and instead of going with something like hyssop, that's very good for clearing and banishing energies, right? I'm going to probably maybe choose something maybe like myrtle. Myrtle is very sacred to the planet Venus. Okay, Venus, Aphrodite, love, right? Venus and Aphrodite did a lot of other things too, but they always just get credited with love, but because they're good at that, right? There are others, right? That's one of the other examples of how learning such just some basic information around your herbs, right? And the correspondences for herbs and plant spirits, how that can be important or significant, okay? All right, but that's it. That is it. You're good. You're good, right? Now, one other thing real quick, because we always focus on practicality when we teach, okay? I used a particular conjure oil for this. There is a conjure or a condition oil in here that is actually really good for banishing and unclearing. Okay. And as you can see from what we did today, I didn't actually use the oil, right? Because as I mentioned, I don't really need to do any banishing work right now. It would be a shame to waste these components when I don't need to do the spell, right? But you don't need fancy conditions or conjure or conditioning or conjure oils, right? If you have nothing else in your house, but like say maybe like olive oil in your kitchen, use that. Use just a little bit of olive oil. That will work just as well. And I recommend olive oil because olive oil in its own energetic state is really, again, kind of very good. It's got a lot of application for just really lots and lots of different things, right? So olive oil is a really good one. If you've got other types of oils, go with those, right? Use what you have. Use what you have. Keep it practical. Always, always keep it practical, okay? And simple, as you can see, simple. Okay. Beyond the preparation of your candle, there will most likely be some additional work that you will need to do. You will need to, of course, raise some energy. You will need to prepare yourself for the energy of that working. Beyond that, you'll need to make sure you're doing the mundane things in your life to also banish that energy, right? If you were trying to get rid of a person in your life, you can light every candle in the world to get rid of that person. But as soon as they text or call you, you immediately respond. You have just negated any kind of spiritual work, any kind of energetic or magical work that you've done. You've got to handle things on both a spiritual and a material, mundane way. Okay. That's the only way you're ever really going to get good results. Okay. And we want good results. Again, results oriented magic. Otherwise, why the hell bother? Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about protection. Okay. This is another topic I wanted to discuss a little bit because it's something that's been, again, well, it's always a conversation, right? But I wanted to talk about just some general tips and things that you can do and ways that you can maybe think about protection, particularly around maybe like yourself, your home, these kinds of things that are again going to be practical and results oriented. Let me remove this aluminum foil here. Anyway, we've talked about protection on the podcast before, but it's always a good topic to revisit because we increasingly, I think, find ourselves living in a world where many of us feel unsafe. And there are things going on in not just in my country, in my area of the world, but all over the place. There are things going on. There are people in power, and it's very scary, I think, for a lot of people, particularly people who are members of the BIPOC community, people who are part of the LGBTQIA community, women, just just women, you know. Um, yeah, it's scary days. Um, and protection is important, right? And we need to make sure that we are, of course, doing everything again on a very material and mundane level to protect ourselves, right? We need to make sure that we are not making foolish decisions, that we're not putting ourselves in dangerous situations, and that we are, maybe voting for people that we know who will maybe assume positions of power that will actually make things better, right? There's lots that we can do in a mundane way, right? But on a magical level, we have a few things to consider, right? When we're looking at how we approach protection, the concept of protection in our magical work, right? The first thing that I want to say, going back to something I said a while back when we were talking about fear, particularly fear around being on the receiving end of baneful magic, is you've got to make sure that as you are casting your spells for protection, you've got to make sure that as you're doing your work around protection, um, that you are not approaching that from a position of fear. And again, that gets very tricky because why else would we protect ourselves if we were not maybe feeling fearful, right? Um, but fear is an energy killer, and it will splinter your focus. In fact, it's probably one of the worst thing for killing energy and splintering focus, right? So you've got to do what you can in the moments where you're feeling like I need to do a protective work or protective working, and you're preparing yourself and you're preparing your spell work, right? You need to make sure that you are doing what you can to step out of fear, even for just a few moments, and step more into a position of personal power, right? And how, this is a scary situation, absolutely. But I know within myself, I have what I need to be able to combat this, that I am smart, that I'm strong, that I'm a survivor, right? That in both mundane material ways and in spiritual and magical ways, I have what I need to be able to make this situation better. And I don't need to go through this struggle or this hardship, right? Um, or I can do what I can to help make sure these people don't have to go through struggle and hardship, right? Because it's really good to be doing protective working for other people as well. Okay, good for you. Okay. Um, so that's one of the first things I want to remind everybody is to step out of a position of fear. Okay. Once your work is done and, and who knows, whatever, right. If there's a part of you that goes, that drifts back into a position of feeling a sense of powerlessness or worry or fear around that, whatever it is, right. That's okay. Right. Move on with your day, move on with your life. But for that moment, you need to step into that. Like, I'm not afraid. I am not afraid kind of an energy, right? We talk about this a lot when we talk about doing things to ward your home as well. That place of power is, and that's a tricky thing because I think for so many people, we grow up in a world now, we are conditioned now in our world by our politics, our society, our economy, religion, certainly traditional religion, right? Everything around us is really kind of geared to show us and to continue to show us and remind us that we are separate, that we are as individuals, that we are weak, that we are powerless to fight the system, all these kinds of things, right? We all deal with these things. We all have these moments, right? Unless you are a straight white man and then you are the system, you know, this video and really this podcast in general really isn't meant for you. But if you are somebody who's ever been in a position where you have felt like I don't have the power that I need here, right? And legitimately so, then this is who we're talking to. This is for you. Okay. But it's easy, I think, to fall into that because we're programmed to do that. We're programmed to be that person, to feel that way, right? And in the process of, sorry, I'm shaking the camera again. I apologize. In the process of stepping into our power as witches, as magical practitioners, whatever you may call yourself, right? We have to do some very intense personal work around how we feel a sense of power in ourselves and in our lives. Because if you can't get to that place, if you cannot get to that moment where you feel that sense of power, you can recognize that you are a powerful being, right? And you're human and you're fallible and you're going to make mistakes. And yes, and maybe you're not always as powerful as you could be in certain situations, right? We all have those moments, right? But in general, you are a powerful being. You are a powerful person. The fact that you are living this life, right, actually is confirmation on a spiritual level that you are a powerful being. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't have been given the opportunity to live your life, right? There would have been a better use for your energy. We'll just say that. Okay. So you are powerful and you need to step into that position of power when you do any kind of working, but particularly for protective work. Okay? And we talk with people again, particularly about going back and talking about warming their homes, cleansing and protecting their homes and their personal space, including personal space, right? That you need to embrace or step into kind of like that alpha kind of an energy, right? You can recite every prayer. You can evoke the Archangel Michael. You can do all of these things in your magical work around protection. But if at the core of your being, you are not able to step into that, I am the dominant energy in this space. I am the power in this space, right? If you can't do that, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your effort and your ingredients. Okay. So remember that and do a little bit of work. Okay, particularly early on in your practice. Okay, do a little bit of work to sit and think about that. Like, I'm a powerful being. I am a powerful being. Right? If you're sitting watching this video now, I want you to say that. I want you to say, I am a powerful being. I am intelligent. I am strong. And remember, strength happens in different ways, right? There's no one kind of strength, right? I have been through some bad shit in my life and I am still here, right? And I am strong. And it is from that position of strength that I will approach my spiritual and my magical work, right? And you need to do that. Okay. Make it an affirmation, a mantra, whatever the hell you want to do with it, right? Anyway, okay, but protecting, okay, back to protection specifics, okay, or logistics, okay. All right, so remember, remove fear, okay. Do some divinatory work, okay. I think there are a lot of people out there that they want to work protection, but and they'll do a spell or a working of some sort, to protect themselves, but they haven't really done any work. They have not made any effort to figure out what the hell it is they are protecting themselves from. And you can't in any situation in any kind of magical working, you really can't just do the spell. Like you need to be specific. You need to know what you're focusing protection on. If you are in some way in your life, you are given signs that you are maybe in danger of getting into a car accident, right? It does you no good to focus on protection, right? If you are not specific around protect me as I am in my car, protect my car, protect me as I am traveling, right? You need to be specific. Okay. And again, that would be true for pretty much any kind of magical work. Okay. It's a tricky thing, specificity in magical work, because you need to be specific enough that you get the results that you want, but not so specific that you prevent your spiritual allies from being able to do their part of the work as well. Okay. Because sometimes if we're too specific, we actually close doors rather than opening, right? I think everybody can appreciate that. So from there, have a clear idea or develop a clear idea of how something like protection works, given the nature of what it is you are protecting. Okay, if you are doing personal protection, okay, I'm going to recommend that you focus your work with personal protection around something that you wear, something that actually goes physically on your body. Okay, that could be a piece of jewelry. That's one of the reasons I think you see witches and magical practitioners, we wear our jewelry so much, right? Or you're like me and you get a lot of piercings, right? Each of my piercings is a spell. The jewelry that I wear is absolutely all spelled. There is intent behind all of that, right? And being able to wear something, being able to get a tattoo, something tattoos are amazing magical focuses, or the I should say the result of a magical focus, right? Because they're permanent, right? They last forever. And the process of getting a tattoo is also something that is very ritualistic, right? You are letting blood, you are in pain, for a prolonged amount of time, depending on how much your tattoo is, right? Beyond that, you get a beautiful piece of artwork that you get to wear on your body for the rest of your life, right? I would hope anyway, right? Otherwise, you might need to get a cover up, right? So be intent, put intent, be intentional, I should say, and put intent in your tattoos, right? And your piercings, wear jewelry. If there's an article of clothing that you wear regularly, right? Maybe if you are someone that, this is a good example I like to make, but I talk a lot with people or have talked a lot with people over the years who are in the medical industry, right? They're nurses or doctors or some other sort of like first responder, and they have kind of like a uniform that they wear, right? they go there, they're scrubs, or maybe they carry again, like in the context of medical staff, like maybe they wear a stethoscope around their neck, right? Or who knows, right? It could be anything, right? But you're going to spell that item. That item needs to be a physical focus or an inclusion in your protective work, okay? For a few reasons. One, we tend to be able to connect to things and find what would you call it? When we make things physical, they're real, right? They're real. And that's a challenge for a lot of people, I think, particularly early on in their magical practice. It's very difficult, I think, to be able to take something like an etheric kind of an energy or something that we would perceive would be purely within the realm of spirit. And it's difficult, I think, for a lot of people to be able to appreciate the way that that energy can manifest in the physical. So it's good from the beginning to start your work with physical things. Okay. So have a physical focus or an anchor of some sort for your protective working. Okay, for sure, something you can wear. Okay, keep close to you. If it's your home, pay attention to the actual physical space of your home, right? Think about, like if something bad were to happen in my home, if I needed to protect my home from something, what would that look like? So say maybe your focus for your protection is making sure that your home doesn't get broken into, right? That you never have to deal with, a robbery or a burglary, or that you would never have an intruder in your home that might harm you or your family, right? And with that being the case, make sure you focus on the physical logistics of your home. Focus on like, okay, if someone were to break into my house, how would they do it, right? Like, do I have maybe like, is there a back door or a window that is really not too easily seen from the street? Like how would someone, like how easily would someone maybe break into my home, right? And then do what you can to focus a good deal of your protection around that weak point, what you would perceive as a weak point. Okay, you're going to do protection around the rest of your home as well, right? But let that be a piece that you really focus on. Okay, focus on those things. Okay, those are important. Okay. um, from there, the methods in which you go about doing your protection really are going to kind of vary, right? I like to do seals and sigils a lot, particularly on entryways into my home. I like to keep the energy in my home as I'm doing things like clearing work. I like to make sure that I add a little bit of note, like this space will always be a comfortable and a safe space for me and the people that I choose to allow to enter this space. Okay. If you're not someone that I have chosen to enter my space or my home, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're not going to want to be in here, and you're not going to have wanted to enter to begin with. Okay. And that's a really easy way to work. What might not seem like protective magic, but in essence it is, right? Because it'll protect you and it'll protect your space over time. Okay. Use things that also lend an air of protection, right? You can use blessed waters, flowed water, holy water are very good, right? Icons, if you're someone maybe who has a little bit of religion back in there somewhere, particularly Catholicism, hang a rosary somewhere in your home, right? There is power in those things, absolutely, because you believe they hold power, right? Otherwise, why the hell would you have a rosary to begin with, right? Um, or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be a rosary, right? It could be a nazar, the blue eye everybody sees and they all call, oh, it's the evil eye. And actually it's not. The symbol is called the nazar, but it does protect against the evil eye. Hang one of those in your home, right? Particularly close to your front door where it can actually see out your front door, where the eye is turning out and looking at who might potentially be coming into your home, right? That's probably the best way to work with those things, okay? Iron is very protective, okay? And it protects in a couple of ways. One, iron on an energetic level is very good at neutralizing energy, but it does not discriminate. Iron will neutralize every energy, okay? So be very careful about where you place iron in your home, particularly if you have a working altar, somewhere where you do your magic and your spells, right? But otherwise, iron is actually very effective at neutralizing energy, and that would potentially include any kind of energy that was directed at you that could be baneful or harmful. So don't be afraid to place a little bit of iron around your home or your property. Okay. Iron is also protective in that we as humans, we tend to associate iron with things like structure, foundation, strength, even weaponry, right? Like shields, armors, these kinds of things, right? So iron's really effective for that as well. Again, psychology, right? A lot of psychology in our witchcraft. Okay. There are countless ways that you can protect your space, and a lot of them, of course, will have strong ties to particular traditions or practices or systems of belief. So you'd have to really kind of look at what yours was. right? If you are aligned to a particular practice or tradition, or if you have a particular system of belief, most of the work that you will do will probably kind of center around that. Okay? And that's how it should be. That's how it should work. Um, yeah. So beyond that, make sure that as you're doing any kind of protective work around yourself or your home, you do need to re-up that work periodically, and it varies. But I would say for yourself, your body, I would say it would be good to add a little bit of additional charge to any kind of protective work that you've done for this, at least monthly, if not more. Okay. For your home, unless you've got some really nasty stuff going on in your space, or you've had an incident where somebody has, somebody's really disturbed your sense of peace around your home, really, to be honest, every 3 months, you should be good. Okay. And in fact, I would actually say rather than doing consistent protective work around your home, it would be good to maybe do protective work maybe every few months or so. And then instead of doing additional protective work, do some sort of cleansing work, maybe monthly in your home, right? You do not need to be doing cleansing work in your home every day. You do not need to do that every day. And in fact, cleansing your home every day, a little bit of an aside here, okay, but cleansing your home every day actually is going over time going to do more to harm the energy in your home than it would be to actually protect or preserve the energy in your home, right? Cleansing, again, people over cleanse just like they over protect, and it's not a good look. It's not a good thing. It confuses the shit out of your spirits. It very often will upset the genus loci, or the spirits of the land that your home is on, right? It's not a good thing. Beyond that, if you're cleansing every day, that would tell me personally that you have a problem. There's something up with you. Like, you are fearful, right? There's something going on, right? And you need to look at that, okay? Because you're operating at that point from a position of powerlessness and fear. Okay. Um, I think I've rambled on longer than I meant to, which I usually do. And Austin was not here to accompany me for this episode, so I'm sure this was probably a little more boring for y'all, this one, because Austin is very entertaining. Me too. He entertains the shit out of me too. Anyway, I'm gonna probably let you guys go. Like I said, I've kept you long enough for this episode, but as I mentioned at the beginning, we didn't want to go a week and not give you anything. I realize some of the information that I discussed in this episode is really kind of a repeat of the prior episodes. We've touched upon things like protection and cleansing, and method for particular kinds of workings. We've talked about that stuff a lot, but those do continue to be, I think, the things that pop up for most people, and certainly the things that can continue to confuse a lot of people. So yeah, do contact us. Let us know. You can message us here on YouTube as this video uploads, or after this video uploads. If you have subscribed and followed us, please subscribe, right? We do this for free. We don't charge people for this, for the podcast, and for so much of the information that we share. So one of the ways that we can continue to do what we do is to get followers. So please subscribe. You can follow us on YouTube. You can check out the podcast on basically every streaming service. We are on every platform now, I believe. Spotify, Amazon, Audible, Google, Apple. We are on all the big ones. Okay. And you can contact us through any of those platforms: social media, Facebook, Instagram. We're on there. Salty Witches Podcast by Kat and Cauldron. And send us your questions, right? In addition to liking and subscribing, send us your questions. Send us things that are confusing you, right? Like, what do I do about this? How do I handle this, right? Send us little notes letting us know how we're doing, right? If there's a way that we're not really helping you in your practice, but you feel maybe we could, let us know. Okay. Send us topic suggestions, right? We love topic suggestions, because those help us to continue to talk and to give you the information that you need. Okay. Because we got stuff that we could talk about forever, right? But I don't know how practical much of that information would maybe be for the majority of our listeners, right? Because it's going to be rooted in our practices, right? Yeah. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another regular episode. Austin will be with me, and we will once again be accompanied by Ashley. Ashley will be recording for us, and we'll see maybe what we have for you next week, right? But as always, thank you so much, and yeah, have a good day.